Welcome to your Warrior Transition Brief. I am Chaplain Mayfield. I'm your battalion chaplain, if you didn't already know that. Today what we're going to be talking about is Warrior Transition as it relates to redeployment and reorientation with your family and friends. This is not just for married Marines. This is not just for Marines with children. This is for all Marines and sailors that are returning for deployment. The objective is to provide crucial information that will help you have a smooth reintegration and transitional reunion with your family and friends. So our agenda and our plan in doing this is we're going to talk about four things. So the four things are: one, what is our current sit rep, our current situation that we're in, the context that we're in. Second, to prepare you to think about and be prepared to articulate your needs, your individual needs, and be able to identify the needs that your friends and your family members have as it relates to you. Thirdly, our expectations, the expectations we have that are contingent upon our needs as we return from deployment and how to properly manage those. And then finally, the ability to be able to communicate effectively and intentionally about what your needs and what your expectations are in order to ensure that you have the smoothest transition, most life-giving transition home possible. The current situation. So, we've been on the unit deployment program as the 4 Deployed Battalion East for the last 6 months. But think about it this way. You've been gone for half a year. Right? I know for many of you, this is not your first deployment, but for most of you, it probably is. Right? So you have spent half of the Earth's rotation around the sun here in Okinawa, away from your friends and family. That's a long time. The months have gone by without you. There have been birthdays, anniversaries. There's been sporting events. There's been thousands of interactions you would have had with people had you been back home. You have not had. Moreover, they have been having interactions without you. Okay? Our interactions and our experience contribute and change us. So you're going to go back a little bit different, if not a lot different, than when you showed up here. And when you go back, they may be different too. Okay, so just prepare yourself for that. This is a different deployment. It's different how? In what ways is this deployment different? Probably than any deployment any Marine has been on in the last 100 years. Pandemic. You all are sitting here in front of me wearing masks. If I would have taken a picture in January of all of you wearing masks and shouted, "Hey, this is what you're going to look like in 6 months," you would think that we were all in Bane costumes or that it's some type of costume party. You would have no idea. But now, here we are. And no one's questioning the fact, I gotta wear a mask. But that's just a snapshot for you to understand that the world that you are going back to is not the same world you left. Okay? And you need to be able to appreciate and understand that as you're transitioning into it, right? I have a daughter that, this is something simple, right? I have a 3-year-old daughter that I took to Chuck E. Cheese along with my other kids before we left. And she wants to go to Chuck E. Cheese. And when I FaceTime with her, she says, "Hey, Daddy, you come to my house, we go to Chuck E. Cheese?" Well, guess what's closed in Jacksonville, North Carolina now because of the pandemic? Chuck E. Cheese. Right? The world has changed. So you need to just prepare yourself for that. Every deployment, we call this, it's a 7-step cycle, the emotional cycle of deployment. Stage 1, anticipation of loss. Right? Unless you were, one of those that was just absolutely, utterly thrilled about going on the deployment. That's not a bad thing, right? Unless you're, trying to avoid something back in the States. Right? There is this anticipation of the deployment coming. As a married father of 4, I know, and in my temperament personality, I usually don't feel anxiety or stress about things until the fire is almost at my feet. Right? I didn't really start feeling this till like January. Right? And I can remember sitting with my dog Dilbert in my lap in front of the fireplace in my house, and like actually speaking out loud to a dog and saying, Dilbert, we only have a few more days of this, buddy, and I'm not going to see you for a while. Right? And so we call that's the anticipation of the coming deployment. Stage 2, right, which can happen before the deployment if you're one of those people that is trying to protect yourself and you start to cut people off, right, to avoid the pain of interaction with them. But it typically happens once you've gone on the deployment. And this is not just you, by the way. This is your family members and your friends as well, right? You go through the detachment and withdrawal, and you kind of go inward because you're feeling the loss. This is very similar to if you all have heard of like the process of grieving, right? And so you're going through that, and you're kind of negotiating and processing a world that's different than the one that you left because you're separated, right? And then stage 3, you have this emotional disorganization. Right, this kind of mix of emotions as you're trying to figure out, process what you're feeling. You may be tempted to distract yourself from that, whether through activities or abuse of substances, things like that. But it's a process that happens as everything's kind of getting renegotiated and reorganized. Stage 4 is recovery and stabilization. And that's when the deployment kind of becomes your normal, and their normal as well. Does that make sense? I think we've all been through that. Right? Does it feel abnormal now? When you have to go out in the USO field for some type of training event or rehearsal or formation, or you go out to the range. I know for me, when I go to the CP, the CP. Down there, when we first got here, it's like, okay, where's the CP? Like, I remember when we came on, I don't know about you all, I was on main body 3, and we drove on to Schwab in the dark, and got everything offloaded. And I'm sitting there with my gear, and for all I knew, Schwab was this gargantuan base, and I would not have been able to find my way around it. But then within like 10 days, 2 weeks, I'm like, hey, Schwab is tiny. It's like 3 major streets, and I know where everything is. It becomes normal. In fact, I like my office in the CP way better than my office at Camp Lejeune, right? So and there's aspects of it that you get used to, and you may even like. Well, the same thing happens for your friends and family back home. They get used to this new normal. Not to say that all of a sudden they don't miss you, right? But they're forced to adjust to life without you. Does that make sense? Stage 5, which is where we are now. Anticipation of homecoming. Right? Anticipation of homecoming. And so, stage 6, renegotiation of marriage, and stage 7, reintegration and stabilization. We want to get there, right? But we're in stage 5 right now. And what you do in stage 5 will help stage 6 and 7 be successful. Right? And I know it says renegotiation of marriage, and most of you are not married, right? This applies to family, friends, girlfriends, things like that as well. You go through the same process. When we're anticipating going home, all of us are starting to fill our aperture with expectations of what that's going to look like. Let's diagnose that and dissect that a little bit. Every single one of us has emotional needs, physical needs, spiritual needs that are largely based off of our personality and our temperament, right? So I'll break it down for you very, very quickly. I'm working on a curriculum for the battalion to do in depth later down the road. But just for the sake of this training, think of it, there's 4 basic temperament types. And those temperaments kind of speak a different language and a different need, and then your personality is another layer on top of that temperament, right? But the 4 basic ones are everybody is either introverted or extroverted. And then on top of that, everybody is either task-focused or person-focused, right? And it's important to be able to process and understand what your particular needs are. And those needs can oftentimes be very, very different from that of your spouse, can be very different from that of your parents, from your siblings, from your friends, who have their own needs, but then also have expectations based off of those needs which they expect you to meet, and vice versa, right? And so it's important for you, I want you all to remember needs and thinking about the process of what are my needs and being able to communicate those. You may feel depleted emotionally, mentally, and spiritually at this point in the deployment. And your needs are what fill you up, recharge you, right? And they are valid. They are valid. And you need to spend time processing this and being able to name them. And if you really desire help in this, I'm available, right? My number's up there if you desire to process this more, right? And so just know that, right? Now, but when I say things like introvert, extrovert, people focus, task focused, how do you think the needs of one person might differ from the needs of another?
Well,
Yeah.
For one who might be introverted and task focused, they're more focused on the things that they're doing and making sure whatever they're doing is a good job. Meanwhile, say a task focused extrovert can be more focused on the task and utilizing people around them to accomplish that task.
Right. So he gave the example of so like a task-focused introvert is more concerned with what needs to be done and doing a good job, and will think of when it comes to redeploying, like what are the things that I need to do in order to feel this way. Whereas a task-focused extrovert, that list is going to look a lot different. They're going to be focused outward, and people are going to be a part of that, but it's going to be a task-driven activity, and that can lead to conflict, right? And so it's important to be able to articulate what it is that you need and desire to yourself, right? But then also do that with your family. So I am a person-focused introvert. I kind of speak the language of peace and harmony. I like to know that everybody's okay, right? That we're stress-free. There's no conflict. And while I love ministering and being around people, I recharge alone, right? So, as a husband and father of 4, do you think I get a ton of alone time? No. And so, does that mean that I am selfish if I desire time alone? No. But sometimes what can happen, let's say if I was married to an extrovert who was person-focused, for them, the thought of being alone is terrifying. And so what can happen is if you don't understand the other person's needs, you can be like, why in the world would you want to be alone? That just sounds awful. I can't believe you want that. Gosh, you're so selfish. Right? Does that things like that play out? Yeah, and it comes from not understanding each other, right? And so just be sure to be able to process and think through, okay, what are my needs? What is it that I need? That's what I want you to think about and process. As you're watching this video, you're supposed to be doing it at the section and team level. Just think through and process that. Some of you may not have thought about that. What are my needs? Good grief, what's Chaps talking about? You've got them. You've got them. Whether or not you're able to say what they are or not, they're there. Because what happens is those feelings that you have, whether it's anticipation, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, those things are manifest themselves when we're depleted and when our needs aren't being met. So our emotions are our body's way of saying, hey, my needs aren't being met right now. This is important. Do not mistake the things you engage in to distract yourself from pain, anxiety, and depression and loneliness, which may come from a lack of having your needs met. Do not mistake those things that you use to distract yourself as a need. What do I mean by that?
Drinking.
Yeah. Drinking. What else can be a distraction? Just to basically kind of medicate our need away. Sex. Pornography. Promiscuity. We already mentioned alcohol. What else?
Drugs.
Yeah. Drugs. But anything can be a distraction. Right? So you think, like, we've talked about this in spiritual fitness before. Constant presence on social media and on our phones. Can that be a distraction? Absolutely. And I would say that's probably the one that your generation struggles with the most, even. Right? And so just do not mistake distractions as being needs. So how you'll know that you're doing that is if for whatever you're feeling, if when you are, if your expectations and desire when you get home, you're like, okay, I cannot wait till I get home because, I'm going to go to place X and just get totally hammered, and then I'm going to get, then I'm going to get laid, and then I'm going to go. You make this list of all these things to basically keep you from having to thinking about how sad you really are, right? So just that's a sign, right? I'm not, and the chaplain is not taking an anti-alcohol or an anti-sex stance here. I believe that sex is an amazing thing within the confines of what God has intended it, right? But those things, anything can become a distraction, right? If it's distracting from our real needs. All right, next slide. Expectations, right? So we got needs, so think about your needs. The next thing I want you to be aware of are your expectations. Expectations are those desires that you have, the things that you desire to do, experience, feel when you get home. When you get home. So you are already populating your heart and mind, you probably have been for a while, with what going home is going to be like. What your expectations are. And we have, I've broken them down into two categories for you. We have experiential expectations, right? Experiential expectations tend to be related to like activities and a feeling or experience. Right? And that experience, if you're an introvert like me, may be sitting in your favorite chair at home with soft music playing and your dog on your lap. Right? So, or it could be, oh, I just want the feeling of being at Buffalo Wild Wings watching Monday Night Football with my crew. Right? Like there's those are all experiential and activity-driven expectations. I can't wait to ride my motorcycle. I can't wait to just fill in those blanks, right? Those are experiential expectations. There may be, though, some challenges to getting your experiential expectations met, right? Potential challenges. One, we've kind of been in a time warp. Right? We left in February. We're stepping back into our world in August. And it's changed. It's changed. That sports bar may be like Chuck E. Cheese. It may not be ready for Monday Night Football. Heck, there may not be Monday Night Football this year. Right? And so just be able to be aware of and manage those expectations. Businesses and restaurants that you missed, they may not be there anymore. They may have significant restrictions. The feeling that we get of just being back with the familiar. The familiar may not be there anymore. Right? I know I'm kind of crossing over to the relational realm a little bit, but like for those of you that live in the barracks, there's a good chance you go back and all of a sudden you've got a different roommate that's a complete stranger. And you've got to go through all that over again. Right? Just be prepared. Start to prepare yourself to manage your expectations. There's the battalion. Our battalion is changing. When we go back, there's going to be a lot of staff turnover. Right? And so your command structure, may change. You may have friends that are going to EAS or PCS. Right? We're going to look completely different in the coming months. You may desire to worship in your home church. I know that's something I've missed. Right? But I don't even know if they're holding services. Just be thinking about those things and manage your expectations. I have a to-do list. These are all the things I'm going to do. And you might not be able to do any of them. Right? So just be thinking through and processing those things. You may have a desire just to go back and do nothing. But there may be a lot of people that have expectations and needs that do not need you to do nothing. Right? So just be thinking about that. Relational expectations. So when my family dropped me off, for ITX. When my family dropped me off from ITX, said goodbye to them in the parking lot, but our departure for the deployment was a little different. My wife and kids left like a day early with the dog, and went to her brother's house. Right. Now part of that was twofold. One, my wife didn't want to go through, like the challenges of kind of your stereotypical farewell, where they're waving, the bus is leaving, and plus we never know when we're really going to leave, right? It's just harder than normal. But I have an amazing wife who knows her husband well and knows his needs well, right? She also knew that I would probably appreciate a good 24 to 48 hours just to process by myself. Right? So, but I'll be honest. Since when I imagined what reunion would be like, you've seen all the videos that go viral where like the Marine or soldier comes home and there's all this running and crying and like the dog jumping up and licking the face and everything like that's what I imagine right? When it's like March and April, and I'm kind of going through that adjustment, that withdrawal and adjustment and renegotiation, I'm thinking there, oh man, it is going to be so awesome. Just, like the music's playing in the background, and my wife's running towards me with our flock of children, and my dog's making a beeline and coming to me, and I drop my sea bag, and that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. We're going into Rom, right? We're going into Rom, and so that's an example of an expectation, right? That needs to be managed. Like, what is it going to look like? What is it I'm going to be able to do based off what I need? What is feasible, and what is expected? What helps meet everybody's needs? Make sense? Flurry of activities that you've missed. So I have 4 kids. I missed 3 birthdays, an anniversary. Right? And if the ITX schedule holds up, I've got a couple kids I've missed 2 birthdays in a row. Right? So just know that time did not stop. There have been things that we've missed. Now, I am thankful. And grateful for the fact that we didn't have to miss Christmas, Thanksgiving, things like that. We were able to be home for those. Right? But we've missed a lot. We usually look forward to summer and a summer leave block. Well, we're going to get home when school started. Right? Football season's supposed to, Lord willing, start up. Right? And Christmas will be just around the corner. Right? And so it will. It's going to feel like a bit of a time warp. Like this time, they've experienced a global pandemic without you. We have been largely insulated from a lot of what's going on in the United States. Yes, I know we're kind of on a bit of a lockdown right now. But chances are, if you went out in town over the last couple of weekends, you've done and experienced more than some people, depending on where your family and friends live, than they've done in months. Right? And so, know that they've experienced a pandemic. There's let's face it, kind of a toxic political climate in the United States right now, with protests and everything else that they've had to experience without you. We've been insulated from that here, right? And so you're going back to a world relationally that's different, right? And so when you reconnect with family, their expectations and needs that you're used to, they've changed a little. You may have an expectation that things are going to be just like they were, and they're not. If you're in a relationship or in a marriage and this deployment may have been a break from some tension or point of contention you've had in that relationship. And you may be feeling some anxiety or anticipation, and they may be that it's going to resurface as soon as you get back. Right? So, being able to manage these expectations and being realistic about them. Your family has been through the deployment too. Right? And just like you have needs and expectations, they have needs and expectations. Your friends, your parents, your siblings, they have needs and expectations too. And you may feel pressured to meet them. Right? Their needs are valid. Their expectations may not be. Needs are always valid. Mindful of, next slide please. That unmet expectations are the single greatest cause of conflict and hurt in relationships, romantic or otherwise. Redeployment presents an opportunity for healthier reunion, but it also presents an opportunity for conflict. Why? Because the people that love you have expectations too. Okay? And so be mindful. Manage your expectations and know that they have them too. Right? Now, I will say, for those of you that have children, and I know that's most of you do not, right? But for those of you that have children, you just need to be prepared relationally. Your children have grown in 6 months. They are going to look different. Whatever you imagine the reunion is going to be like with individual children, it will probably look different than that, depending on the age of the child. If you have young children, like I'm talking a few months old to 2 to 3 years old, they may not come to you right away. They may be wary. Because you've been gone for 6 months. They may not remember you if they're young enough. Right? Just prepare yourself for that. Now, FaceTime kind of alleviates that. That used to be a lot bigger concern than what it is now with the advent of things like FaceTime, Zoom, and Skype, and all that. But it's still, there's something different for that little mind from the face they see on the screen to all of a sudden when they're presented with it. And it's going like this, right? And so just be mindful that that's a possibility, but it passes with time, right? It passes with time. Younger children and older children, there may be a little bit of standoffishness too, as they kind of re-enter the relationship, because they're not sure how to act. Right? Teenagers, tend to hold things back because they want to make sure that they're still safe and allowed to say and do the things that they were before. Because it's been a minute since they've seen you. Things you may have been cool with before, you may not be cool with now. Right? And they're smart enough to know that, right? And so that's just an example. Be mindful when you re-engage with children. For those of you that have little brothers and little sisters, little cousins, things like that, the same kind of thing can happen as well. Expectations are the greatest source of conflict and hurt because the people who love you have expectations too. So we've talked about needs. We've talked about that those needs generate expectations, right? So what is the best way? What is the solution to mitigating the conflict and the stress and the hurt that can come from unmet expectations? Communication. Communication. Some of you are good at it. Some of you absolutely suck at it. Right? So, communication. Communicating your needs and expectations to your spouse, family, and friends. When? Now. And having an honest discussion about them is the best way to avoid conflict and ensure that your needs and expectations are met as well as theirs. The greatest key to avoiding unnecessary conflict is for both people to determine at the onset that resolution is the goal, not victory. Can someone explain what I mean by that?
You're not necessarily focusing on like your own personal gain, but you're more focusing on like kind of finding common ground between you and the other party member.
Yeah, you were going to say something?
Just so that like the goal is not for one person to be like dictating this is my way or the highway kind of attitude, but rather take both people's opinions and then
Yeah, very good, very good.
compromise.
Yeah, compromise. Compromise, not my way or the highway, right? So our natural, this is something you all need to be aware of, right? Our natural tendency as human beings, and probably more so as Marines too, our natural tendency when we sense a conflict coming is to press for victory. We want to win the argument. We want to make sure that we win, right? And so the posture you need to take relationally, especially in marriage, is your emotional glove should never go up. But your hand should always go down. Right? And at the onset, hey, we're gonna work on how to resolve this. Right? Can anybody think of, so if you're having a conversation with a loved one over FaceTime, here talking about the things that you want to do when you get home or things like that. Can you think of a way that you could preface the conversation to kind of ensure that that's what happens or contribute to that happening? Especially if you've never talked like this before, right? It can kind of catch people off guard. But say if you're talking with your wife or your girlfriend or your parents, be like, hey, I want you to know that I love you very much. And your needs are important to me. I want to do what I can to help you get what you need. But I also want to articulate what mine are too. And can we have a conversation about how we can both get our needs met? So when you frame a conversation like that, that's like before you go in with hey, I want to take a trip to X and bring such and such with me, and then we're going to do this. Right? Are you articulating a need? No, you're dictating a want. Right? You're dictating an expectation. Right? But when you frame the conversation like I did, what are you communicating? Her opinion matters. What else? More than her opinion, what? She matters. Her needs matter. Her expectation matters, right? So much conflict comes from unmet expectations because what we don't realize, especially, for people your age that are still kind of figuring out, okay, what are my needs, right? We're built that way. That's our fuel. We need it so badly that if we feel like there's a threat to us not getting it, what happens? The claws come out immediately. We may not even be able to say why, right? But what framing the conversation does like that, it communicates to the person, hey, what you need is important, and what you need matters, and I want to help to get that need met. Right? It is amazing the amount of conflict that dissipates when people know that there is a plan in place to get their needs met, even if it's not on the timeline they initially wanted. Does that make sense? Because that threat is gone. Okay. He gets me. He hears me. And I know we're talking kind of in terms of romantic relationships here, but this works with, mom and dad too. This works with friends. Right? The worst thing that you can do, and depending on what your particular temperament, introvert, extrovert, people, task focus, the worst thing you can do, because there's some that have a tendency just to withdraw from that situation. Why do they do that? To avoid conflict. Don't avoid conflict. Right? Don't avoid the temptation to withdraw. Stay present in it, but frame the conversation in a way. If you love someone, you're going to care about their needs too. If you don't, that just means you're a sadist that loves yourself. Right? And they're just a pawn in your game. The needs of your family and friends. They have needs that are valid. Encourage them to think about them. So the same thing that I'm encouraging you all to do here in this moment, in your conversations with the people that you love back home, encourage them to do the same thing. Right? In fact, with this being posted on YouTube, what's something you could do? Show them the video. Right? And so, encourage them to be doing the same thing. Come up, make that your kind of your reunion plan. Excuse me. Come up with a reunion plan, a roadmap. Right? And for those of you who are single, you know, the same thing applies, right? And so, encourage them to communicate. And if they are unrealistic, it's okay to set boundaries, right? But compromise. I know, and if there's any moms watching this, sorry. I love you. I love you too, Mom. But sometimes, some of us can have moms that have very unrealistic expectations. Right? So it's okay to set boundaries, especially if it's coming down to a competition between mom and spouse. It's okay if unrealistic expectations are being thrown on you, you can lovingly set boundaries. It doesn't mean that their need is invalid, but the expectation may be unmanageable. Does that make sense? So you work towards a compromise. Like, no, I can't come stay at your house for 3 weeks. You know, how about I stop by on a Sunday afternoon on this such and such day? You know, or something like that's how this works. Right? And in doing this and being forward and leaning into your communication, right? You'll be able to stave off conflict, right? And for everyone, if you be verbal and direct, but approachable and able to compromise. What do I mean by being direct? That can be hard for so many people. It's not hard for our task-focused extroverts, but it can be hard for some of the other temperaments. What do I mean by being direct? Don't beat around the bush. Who here knows if I say, hey, you're being passive aggressive? Who knows what that means? What's it mean?
It means that you're trying to get your wants and needs met, but you're not going to be like forward, like direct about it. You're not like actually voicing your opinion, so in a way that they can understand immediately. It's just kind of you're waiting on them to figure it out.
Right. So, a passive-aggressive comment would be like to say, you know, I'm talking to Corporal Tony, and I really it would be very meaningful for me if he were to come to chapel on Sunday to hear me preach. A passive-aggressive comment would be like, and Corporal Tony, I hear, like if you go to chapel, it's a very healthy thing for you to do, and actually contributes to your wellness. Like, you see what I did? Like, that's a passive-aggressive comment. I know he doesn't go to chapel. I'm not like diming him out here, right? I'm just using an example, right? I know that he doesn't go to chapel. But I'm saying, I'm trying to communicate without being direct. Right? Being direct would be like, hey, I would really love it if you came to chapel on Sunday. Right? That's being direct. Right? Passive-aggressive communication is terrible. Terrible. Because it always gives the person an out to say, well, that's not what I meant. Because basically what they're doing is they're kind of in a way putting their toe in the water to try and communicate something without actually saying it, so they can have plausible deniability that's not really what they want. All right, does that make sense? So be direct. Don't be passive aggressive. But what that also means is you need to allow people to be direct back and not be defensive about it. Right? And not be defensive about it. So, be sure to communicate directly, especially because when you're talking about needs and expectations and doing those things, you need to be direct, but also if you frame the conversation right and you've communicated your intent, right, to help them meet their needs and meet their expectations in a meaningful way, that frames it in a way where you both have the freedom to be direct, whoever you're talking to. Okay? Anybody have any questions on that? All right. I've got the example here on the fourth bullet, or third bullet on the right side. Like, you know, an example is for people that are introverted, they may need excessive self-time. Right? And so that's an example of conflict, because if the people you love are very extroverted, they may presume that means you don't like them. Right? It's like speaking a different language. They don't understand. Right? And so just know that we all have different needs, like we've talked about, and just be able to communicate them and don't invalidate the needs of the other. Right? And so while also ensuring that you're setting reasonable expectations, and you can help them talk through how to meet theirs as well. Okay? All right. So we've talked about three things that I want you all to take away from this. The first one is what? We all have needs. Needs. Know what they are, process them, think about them, right? And do not mistake what for needs? Wants. Distractions. Yeah, do not mistake distractions for needs. Okay? The second thing, we all have expectations that are based off of those needs. And we need to be able to manage those expectations in light of our current context and situations. And lastly, what do we need to do about our needs and wants? Communicate them. Communicate them, and help those that you love communicate theirs to you. And then come up with a plan together to be able to meet those needs. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about anything we've covered so far? Okay, for those of you that are watching, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I love talking about this stuff, and I can help you in any way possible, whether it's the formulation of your own needs, your expectations, or even being able to communicate with those you love at home well. For you family members that have been watching, I pray that you were blessed by this. This was helpful, and God bless all of you. All right, take care.